My name is Noriko Shikata, Deputy Cabinet Secretary for Public Relations of Prime Minister's Office. At the outset, I would like to just refer to a couple of points that Chief Cabinet Secretary Edano mentioned in his press conference this afternoon from 4 p.m. As you are aware, we have introduced simultaneous interpretation for these press conferences. So you are welcome to attend those press conferences by Chief Cabinet Secretary Edano with prior registration. Let me just refer to a couple of points that he made regarding the wish for some of the residents who evacuated from 20-kilometer radius of Fukushima Daiichi. Mr. Edano said that the government recognizes there is a strong request from some residents evacuated from 20-kilometer radius of Fukushima Daiichi, strongly wish to go back to their homes, even temporarily. We do desire to respond to that request, and now have started examining the possibility whether it is possible or not from the viewpoint of ensuring safety. And secondly, Prime Minister Khan has started to contact with the heads of the local prefectural and the municipal governments in the quake-hit areas to grasp clearly the situation of the affected regions and listen to their requests. And this was in relation to Prime Minister Khan having had a conversation with the mayor of Rikuzen, Takada City. And nextly, as for the Fukushima Daiichi, high level of radioactive substances in stagnant water was detected at unit number 2. We are embarking on removing such water from the reactor while securing the safety of the workers on site. And this will be discussed by Mr. Nishiyama later on, I believe. And Mr. Edano further mentioned that the reason behind the development that the high level of radioactive substance in stagnant water was detected at the Unit 2 was, as he believes, the fuel rods inside the reactor were exposed above water for some time, and a certain amount of radioactive materials has melted. However, cooling functions are working properly at present. And also the issue of voluntary evacuations. The government has encouraged the residents living in the radius between 20 and 30 kilometers from the nuclear power plants to voluntarily evacuate. We'll continue to provide information to them thoroughly and give a detailed response to those who choose to stay in the zone, as well as those who wish to evacuate respectively. And regarding the workers who are exposed to high-level radiation at Unit 2, they are expected to leave the hospital tomorrow. It is a welcome sign that the period of their hospitalization was short. We will continue to ensure safety management thoroughly in order to prevent similar accidents from ever happening again in the future. And lastly, regarding compensation for those farmers who have suffered from the suspension of agricultural products shipments caused by the nuclear power plant accident, the Japanese government intends to respond properly, including the provision of temporary payment with a view to supporting their business and livelihood. So this concludes my reference to Mr. Edano's press conference this evening. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Nishiyama of NIST to have an opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to briefly update the status of Fukushima #1 site. Regarding reactors, we are now introducing pure water with fire engines to the reactor of the unit 1, 2, and 3. And now parameters of fuel core of those units are stable. We will replace fire engines with electricity-driven pumps as early as today regarding units 1, 2, and 3. In the case of the unit 2, we'll begin to use a pure water tank instead of a temporary tank with which we put boron. By taking those actions, we will establish sustainable cooling system for the fuel core of units 1, 2, and 3. Regarding spent fuel pool, we introduced seawater with concrete injecting machines to the spent fuel pools of the units 3 and 4 today. For the spent fuel pool of the unit 1, we will do the same thing on March 29th. In parallel, we'll begin to introduce pure water instead of seawater and replace fire engines with electricity-driven pumps. That we will do that very soon. The aim of these actions is to formulate sustainable cooling system for spent fuel pool of units 1 through 4. Regarding restoration of electricity, we will prepare, confirm integrity, and or find substitutes of direct current electricity cable. Also, we'll confirm integrity of air conditioners attached to reactor buildings. Those are examples of many activities with respect to electricity restoration. Finally, I'd like to comment on radiated water, which was found in the reactor buildings and also within the sea. First of all, we found highly radiated water in the turbine buildings of, turbine building, not reactor building, turbine building of units 1, 2, and 3. We plan to pump it up and store the water, radiated water, into isolated pool or pit, so that the water will not run into outside world. We already began this type of work regarding Unit 1. After that kind of work, we'll wash the place and we'll continue the works we should do regarding restoration of electricity and restoration of pumps and so on at those places. Separately, we detected increased figure regarding radiated materials in the seawater at the canal attached to the site. However, the data shows this slightly radiated seawater. Regarding this seawater, the effect to human health is very small, and we can see that from the data which was taken from the ship around 30 kilometers from the site. However, we will closely watch the data in this sea area so that we can we can keep the good environment in the sea near the site. That's all for my report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nishiyama. Then I'd like to ask Mr. Shinano, Councillor Secretariat of Nuclear Safety Commission. Okay, then I'd like to ask Mr. Watanabe of MEXT to go next.
Well, I'd like to explain the monitoring activities of MEXT, and please see the handouts of papers. And additionally, many data on that. I would like to point out 2 points. One point is we have additional data of sea area monitoring just from 30 kilometer front of Fukushima nuclear power plant. And one more thing, the additional information is the airborne radioactive analysis is done by the Ministry of Defense, and the paper is written only in Japanese, but we attached the yesterday's data in this paper, so you can see compare the yesterday's data and today's data of the airborne monitoring by the Ministry of Defense. This 2 point is new information for today. Thank you.
Okay, then Mr. Shinano, please.
I'm from the Secretariat of the Nuclear Safety Commission. Let me explain on behalf of the NSC. The NSC, from immediately after this accident, has been evaluating or assessing the results of the environmental monitoring conducted by MEXT and have been communicating the data to the various ministries and agencies for use in taking countermeasures and responses. From Friday last week, we decided to change our policy and to communicate the monitoring results not only to the related ministries and agencies but to the public at large. Therefore, we would like to, on a daily basis, share with you the results of the environmental or the results of our assessment of the monitoring results which have been provided to us by MEXT. And basically, by 1600 hours, the data compiled as of 1600 hours that same day will be assessed by the NSC and will be relayed or made public by that evening. That's the basic scheme. As MEXT has just explained, the most up-to-date monitoring results are being assessed now. So today I would like to share with you the results of NSC's assessment of yesterday's MEXT monitoring results. And as it indicates, first of all is the air radiation levels. As for air radiation levels, these were taken at a point 30 kilometers northwest from the site, and the dose rate was slightly higher than normal. However, this is not a level that would have an impact on human health. As for the developments of the dose rate, air dose rate, I think we must continue to closely monitor the air dose rates going forward. The second is the concentration of radioactive materials in the air, and to the south of the site we have seen slightly higher readings, in particular for iodine 134. it does exceed slightly the dose limit. However, because it has a very short half-life of just 8 days, this is not a level that would have an impact on human health, we believe. But it's necessary to continue to closely monitor the concentration of iodine 134 as well. Next is airborne monitoring using planes. In order to assess the diffusion rate of airborne materials, we need to take samples at a lower speed and at lower altitudes than now. Therefore, we have instructed MEX to conduct monitoring under such conditions going forward. The fourth is about environmental samples. There are various environmental samples, for example, water in the surface, such as in ponds and rainwater. Also, soil fallout and seawater monitoring are conducted. Grass and in soil, we have seen slightly higher radiation levels or concentration levels, which both require closer monitoring. As for seawater, it's not the concentration in the seawater, but rather the impact on human health through marine produce or seafood. That needs to be assessed. For example, iodine 134 or 131 has a short half-life of 8 days. Also, through diffusion, iodine 131 can be diluted to a large extent. Therefore, by the time people intake such seafood, we believe that the level of radiation would have been greatly reduced. Fifth is the assessing the environmental radiation levels by prefecture and municipality. As for air dose rate, although some regions exhibit slightly higher levels than normal, we believe that they're not to the extent that would impose an immediate health risk. Also for tap water, the MHLW's data must be monitored quite closely, we believe. Next, data, which is based on environmental monitoring, shows that for all items, they all fall below the intake consumption limitations for foodstuffs in general. However, they both require close monitoring. So those are the results of assessment by the NSC of the monitoring results that we received up to 1600 hours yesterday, and we'd like to make a similar update to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Shinano. Then I'd like to ask Ms. Iseki to have an opening remarks.
I would like to briefly provide the test results of food sample reported yesterday, 26 March. In total, 62 food samples are tested in 5 respective prefectures, which are Fukushima, Niigata, Ibaraki, Gunma, and Yamagata prefecture. Among them, in one sample, which is a vegetable in Fukushima, the level detected exceed the regulatory limit. Thank you.
I guess the visible that exceeded the level was hana wasabi. Yes. So it's a kind of flower wasabi anyway. Okay, then, and lastly, I'd like to ask Mr. Takeshi Matsunaga of Foreign Ministry.
Thank you, Mr. Chikata. I would like to explain briefly about the acceptance of relief supply and medical assistance team from Israel. Today, we have received relief supply from Israel. A chartered flight landed Narita Airport at 2:40 this afternoon, and the relief supply consists of a lot of coats, blankets, gloves, as well as portable toilets, and those relief supply heads to Fukushima Prefecture. And in addition, I would like to also explain about the provision of medical assistance team by Israel. That team consists of 53 members, including 14 medical doctors, as well as 7 nurses, and technicians, interpreter, and logistic support personnel. They are about to land Narita Airport. They are scheduled to arrive in Narita 8:30 tonight. And on arriving in Narita, they head to Miyagi Prefecture. They station in Kurihara City, and the site of their activity will be in Minami Sanriku Town in Miyagi Prefecture. The duration of the team's activity is scheduled to last 2 weeks, subject to change depending on the situation on the site. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has dispatched 4 personnel to support their activities. Thank you very much. And in addition, we also distributed a press release with respect to additional relief supply from the Republic of Korea. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Matsunaga. Now I'd like to open the floor for the questions. When you ask a question, please limit it to one question, and please identify yourself with name and affiliation. Okay, go ahead. And please come close to your microphone.
Like this? Am I good? I'm Whitney Hurst from CNN. So with more and more alarming data coming out every day from the Fukushima plant, it seems that the Japanese public is losing confidence in the government and TEPCO's response to this crisis. How can the government assure the Japanese public that you have control of this?
Could you specify whom you'd like to ask the question?
Shikata-san and Nishiyama-san, I guess. Anyone that would like to answer, I would accept.
CNN ですけれども、毎日のように福島原発から非常に心配なといいますか、非常に懸念を引き起こすようなデータがどんどん出ている中、日本の国民は政府並びに東京電力がこの問題、東京電力によるこの問題の扱いに対してどんどん信頼を失っていると思うんですけれども、どのようにして日本の国民に対してきちんと物事を収集しながらコントロールしながら対応しているんだということで、どうやって国民を安心させるおつもりなんでしょうか。この質問は四方さんあるいは西山さんあるいはどなたでもお答えいただける方で構いません。
Just let me come up with an overall picture. What we have been trying to do is to try to explain as much as possible and to try to keep transparency in terms of announcement. So even if there are bad news, we try to send out messages. And of course, this issue is not limited to the concerns in this country. We realize that this is an issue of the global attention. And so that's background behind our efforts to conduct this kind of press briefings every day, as well as introducing simultaneous interpretations for Mr. Edano's press conferences. And in the meantime, all the government agencies involved here are trying to send out messages as soon as they know the situation. And of course, in light of the new developments, we are aware of the need to take appropriate actions, and that we are trying to do with all-out efforts inside the Japanese government, and also in coming up with a very close partnership with the the TEPCO in the case of Fukushima Daiichi. And as far as the specifics regarding Fukushima Daiichi, I would like to ask Mr. Nishiyama to have a comment.
まず私たちの役割は、この2社の役割はプラントのデータについて、これを透明性を持って、公表し、時期に遅れず公表し、それについて、我々のしっかりとした見解を述べるということだと思います。
The role of NISA, the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency, is to make public the data regarding the nuclear power generation plant without delay and with transparency, and to make sure to give our views regarding that data.
その上で、今どういう戦略をとってこの事態を、収めようとしているかということを明らかにするということです。それは一言で言えば、原子炉と使用済み燃料プールを冷却し、それから電源を引き込むことによって、冷却を持続可能なものにしていくということです。
And upon doing so, we intend to make known what strategy we are taking for controlling the situation. And in one word, that would be to cool the reactor and spent fuel pool, and also to achieve a sustainable cooling, to achieve sustainable cooling by bringing in the power source.
Next question, Christoph.
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany, Neidhardt. A question for Mr. Shinano. You mentioned iodine 134, and you said it.
131.
Oh, then you probably misspoke.
Oh,
then
sorry.
yeah, you said 134 because that half-life is very much shorter. Okay. No, let me ask anyway, because of that relatively short life of half-life of 131. The question is much less problematic with 131 and 134, because it's probably about a week since these iodine 131 has been released by the reactors, or maybe a bit more. So if you calculate back, you must estimate much higher doses, probably double the dose for the time when it was released. So would that still be within the limits?
ドイツの通信社ですけれども、要素131の半減期は比較的短いんですけれども、要素131および要素134の半減期は低いので、その点は問題ないんですけれども、おそらくこの週の初めから要素131は放出されていたと思うんです。ですから要素131、134が放出され始めた地点に遡って計算した場合には、おそらく今推定されているレベルよりも相当高くなって、一番最初に放出が始まった時から遡って計算すると、今発表されて今のものよりも2倍ぐらいになるんじゃないかと思うんですけれども、それでも上限以内に収まるのでしょうか。
まず私の方からそのデータのことについて、特に今朝発表された東京電力のデータについて説明いたします。
Then let me first explain about the data you are referring to, particularly the data that has been made public by TEPCO this morning.
要素の134の方は、今日の東京電力が発表したデータには、131との比率を考えても、少しおかしいと思うところがありまして、東京電力もこれを再評価する予定と聞いております。それについては東京電力からまた発表があると聞いています。
And regarding the iodine 134, when we take into consideration the ratio between iodine 131, we tend to feel that the data that was made public by TEPCO today is a bit strange and a bit odd. And I have been told that TEPCO is going to reevaluate the numbers and is going to make public the results of their reevaluation.
先ほどの、事故の当初からの、その要素131での、被爆のトータルの話ですけれども、昨日、お配りしたプレスリリースで、その当初からの要素131での、その被爆線量の推測値というのをお示ししています。これはこういう地図で昨日お示ししたんですが、これを見る限りは、当初からのものを積分しても、そのエリアでは問題がないというふうに評価をしています。
Regarding your question regarding total release from the very beginning, going back to the beginning of the week for iodine 131, in the press release that we distributed during this press briefing yesterday, we have distributed an estimate in the form of a map of the exposure to iodine 131 from the very beginning of the week. And even when we take into consideration the levels from the very beginning, it is our evaluation that there is no problem with the area concerned.
Next question.
Yes, Georgie Sakurai with Associated Press. Regarding the level of 10 million times the normal amount in the water in Unit 2, what are the risk factors that you assess for the ambient soil, for the general public in general? And is this a sign that the efforts to bring things under control are going badly awry?
AP のものですけれども、第2号機の、たまり水の放射能レベルが通常の1000万倍であったということに関して、これがその周辺の土壌に伴うリスク要因はどのぐらいあるんでしょうか。一般国民に関してのその周辺の土壌に伴うリスク要因というのはどのぐらいになるのでしょうか。で、このことは全体を収集しよう、コントロールしようという取り組みが非常にまずい状態になっているという兆候なのではないんでしょうか。
まず先ほど申しましたようにデータにおいて新しい再評価したデータを見る必要はあると思います。
As I mentioned earlier, I believe there is a need for us to see the data after it is re-evaluated.
それから今タービン建屋の地下に溜まっている水についてはこれは外の世界に出ないようにしっかり管理しながら今の場所からどかしていくということになりますから、これ自身の外の世界への影響はありません。国民生活への影響はありません。
And also, the water that is now stagnant in the basement of the turbine building is going to be properly managed and controlled so that it will not be released to the outside world. And we are going to get it out of the way without having it released to the outside world. And so the water itself would not have any effect on the lives of the people in the surrounding area.
で今やっている冷却作業が今のように進めば、これから先のが新しく、この放射性物質が生まれてくるということはなくなると思っています。
And also, as the cooling work that we are now undertaking proceeds smoothly, going forward, I do not believe we will have any new generation or new creation of radioactive material.
Thank you. Khaldun Azhari, Panoramic News. I just have, I would like one comment first. Do you mean after the cooling is done, the issue is finished basically? Like there is no problem on the side, in the units? There will be no more radiations after it's cooled. That's just comment at your comment. And secondly, I'm planning to go to Fukushima. So basically to Iwaki City, and it's inside the 50 kilometers. And I remember the United States made advisory to be away from Fukushima up to 80 kilometers. So do you think there's a risk if somebody goes to Iwaki tomorrow? Thank you. Which is, Iwaki is like 45 kilometers from the station.
Excuse me, can you give me affiliation? Red magazine? Orient News。オリエントニュースですけれども、一つコメントがまずあります。冷却ができれば、基本的には今の問題はもう収束するということなんでしょうか。すなわち冷却さえできれば、各ユニットに関してはもう問題がない。そして冷却ができた後はもう放射能が排出されないということになるんでしょうか。それはまたコメントですけれども。で、私、明日福島に行く予定にしておりまして、いわき市大体50キロ圏内、45キロぐらいのところなんですけれども、ご存知のように、アメリカは福島原発から半径80キロまで避難勧告をしておりますけれども、今、いわき市、大体原発から45キロのいわき市に行った場合には、何かリスクがあるとお考えですか？
まずプラントを冷やした後でもこれまでに発生してしまった放射性物質はまだありますから、それを適切にコントロールしなければいけないですけれども、いけないことはあります。
First of all, even after cooling the plant, the radioactive material that have been generated up to now will still be there. So we would have to properly control the radioactive material that is already there.
それから、アメリカ政府の80キロの避難地域というのは、これはアメリカでも原則は10マイルが避難地域で、50マイルの距離というのは、その中での、食物などの摂取制限についての距離だというふうに理解しています。ただ、
And regarding the advisory of the U.S. government of up to 80 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, I understand that even in the United States, the evacuation area is in principle 10 miles from the nuclear power generation plant. And the area that is 50 miles from the nuclear power plant is an area in which there is a limit on ingestion of food.
ただアメリカ政府は最初に80キロあるいは50マイルを提案されたのは、やはり 日本という自分の国以外の国のことなので、よく事情もわからないこともあって、非常に保守的にその距離を設定されたのだと理解しています。ですから今日本は20キロで設定していますので、避難地域を20キロと設定していますし、これを守っていただければいわきについては問題ないと考えています。
Having said so, I just want to add that the reason why the United States gave an advisory of 80 kilometers, in other words, 50 miles, in the very beginning is, as I understand it, because the incident happened in Japan, which is a country that is different from their own country, from the perspective of the U.S. government. And since they were not able to know exactly the circumstances, it is my understanding that in the beginning they took a very conservative stance. Currently in Japan, the evacuation area is designated at an area of a radius of 20 kilometers from the nuclear power generation plant. And as long as you can abide by that evacuation area, there is no concern, there is no problem with Iwaki City.
And regarding radiation level in Iwaki City, our colleague from MEXT has some comment.
From our observation, this morning the Iwaki City, nearest center of the Iwaki City, just south of 45 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, the radiation level is 0.8 microsievert per hour.
Martin.
Andrew Morse from the Wall Street Journal. This is a question for Mr. Nishiyama. With regards to the pools of highly radioactive water in the buildings, could you tell us how do you think it is escaping from the reactors and getting into the buildings itself? And also, could you tell us how you think it is getting from the buildings into the sea? Thank you very much.
ウォール・ストリート・ジャーナルですけれども、西山審議官に質問です。建屋の中の放射能レベルの高い水の塊といいますか、水に関してですけれども、どうやってその放射能レベルの高い水が原子炉から出て建屋、原子炉から抜け出して建屋の中に入ったとお考えでしょうか。そしてどうやって建屋から海水の方に移ったとお考えでしょうか。
まずこの水の中にある、放射性物質は確かに、原子炉あるいは、使用済み燃料プールのどちらかに、由来するものだというふうに考えられます。で、その上で、今は原子炉からの可能性が高いと思っています。
The radioactive material that is found in that water, it is true, is either from the reactor itself or the spent fuel pool. And at the moment, we consider that the possibilities are higher that the water is from the reactor.
ただその水自身がどこから来たかというのはまた別にいろいろ可能性があると思います。ただその中で、原子炉から水が来たとするとそれは、格納容器から、いくつかの弁とかあるいは、配管を通している部分の、なんていうかな、その、配管を通している部分の隙間だとかそういうところから出てきたとなのではないかと考えています。
Regarding where the water itself is coming from, I believe there are a variety of different possibilities regarding where the water itself is coming from. And if the water is coming from the reactor, there's a possibility that it is coming from either the number of valves that we have in the container vessel, or through the areas, through the areas or the open spaces that appear from the places where the pipes are placed. So if it is water is from the reactor, those may be possibilities that could be considered.
ただその今のようないろいろな可能性がある中で、どれが真実かということはもう少しこれから調べてみないとまだ結論は出せていません。
I must say, however, that from among the various possibilities that can be considered, we have not been able to reach a conclusion regarding which of these possibilities is the truth. And we would have to do some further study.
それから海の水の放射との関係は今のところその溜まっている水が海に流れるということは考えられないと思っています。
And also, regarding the relationship between the water with the high level of radioactivity and seawater, at the moment we do not conceive of the possibility of the stagnant water in the building flowing into the sea. That is not possible.
Water has already flown, something has already flowed into the sea.
もうすでに海には何か流れ込んでいると思うんですけれども、
それはまず放射能のレベルは非常に低いものであるということと、それが今の溜まった水とは考えられないと思っていますので、可能性としては蒸気と水蒸気と一緒に排出された放射性物質が海に落ちていったとか、あるいは雨なり他の水によって地面にあった放射性物質が海に流れ込んだとか、そういった可能性を考えています。
First of all, anything that has flowed into the sea is water with only a very low level of radioactivity, and at the moment we do not believe it is possible that any of the stagnant water in the buildings has flowed into the sea. The possibility that we are considering is radioactive material that has been released together with the steam dropping into the sea, or radioactive material from rain or any other sources of water, or radioactive material on the ground may have flowed into the sea. So we are considering now such possibilities.
Question, Süddeutsche Zeitung. Question to Mr. Nishiyama and Mr. Shinano. Those people in the 20 to 30 kilometer zone, they have been in their houses for about 2 weeks now. Now, European experts say that to stay indoors and close the window is a very good protection for up to 48 hours. After that, you have circulation of air even through closed windows. So, do you think they are still protected in this area? And second question. Asahi Shimbun predicts that the government will raise the INES level to 6. What does stop the government to do that? Because this is clearly a graver accident than 3 Mile Island. Thank you.
Excuse me, can you give us your affiliation?
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany.
南ドイツ、南ドイツ新聞のものですけれども、西山さんおよび信濃さんに質問があります。まず、現在、20キロから30キロ圏内の人々は屋内待機で、もう2週間屋内待機が続いているんですけれども、一部のヨーロッパの専門家によりますと、確かに48時間までは屋内にとどまって外に出ないで窓を閉めるというのが48時間まではいい対応策ですけれども、その後は閉まった閉じられた窓を通してでも空気の循環は起こるので、48時間以上に関しては必ずしも屋内待機が保護策にはならないと言っております。それと、あと朝日新聞によりますと、政府は今回の事象のアイナスの格付けをレーティングを6に引き上げようとしている予定であるということが報道されておりますが、今回のようにスリーマイル島の事故よりもより深刻な事故に関して何が政府をアイナスの評価レベルを6に引き上げることをとどまらせているのでしょうか。
まず私の方からアイネスの評価のことについて最初にお答えします。これは一番最初、24時間以内に登録する段階で4のレベルを登録し、でその後炉心の損傷の状況を考えて5のレベルにいたしました。
Let me respond to your question regarding the INES rating. In the very beginning, at the stage when we had to register within the first 24 hours, we registered a level of 4. And subsequently, taking into consideration the damage that we assumed had occurred in the reactor core, we registered a level of 5.
それで今の5段階というものもこれは暫定的な評価でありますので、これから先は今の緊急の対応の努力が一段落ついたところで炉心の状況なども見ながら評価を改めて考えたいと思っております。それで必要があれば今の評価を修正することもあり得ると思います。
And the current level of 5 that we have registered is also a tentative rating. Going forward, once the efforts that we have been taking to deal with the emergency settles down, and when we are able to take a good look at the situation of the reactor core, we intend to once again register a rating. And at that point, if we see the need, we may revise the level that we will be registering at that point.
先ほどの屋内退避に関するご質問ですけれども、いろいろな経路について先ほどご説明がありましたけれども、私どもとしてはその屋内にいれば空間占領に対する遮蔽効果があるというふうに考えておりますので、一定の効果があるというふうに理解をしています。
Let me respond to your question regarding indoor shelter. You have mentioned a number of routes of air circulation. It is our position, however, that as long as you stay indoors, you'll be able to shut out the spatial radiation dose rate. and therefore we consider that there will be a certain level of effect by staying indoors.
My name is Rahman Malik from the Muslim World News. I would like to ask a question to TEPCO. Is there any arrangement if one or two reactors fail working, so other reactors in the country, they are connected, that within a short period of time they can supply energies to the areas where this one reactor is failed to work, or sometime it can be closed for overhaul or maintenance or something. Because I experienced, it was second or third day, that even in Tokyo and all parts of Japan, even the signals and everything was stopped. There was a huge load shedding only because one reactor stopped working. And all others, they were still working, they were functioning, but the problem was really great. And I think because of connections between these reactors with each other.
ムスリムワールドニュースのマリクと申しますが、東電に質問があります。原子炉が1基あるいは2基、機能をしなくなった場合に、日本の国内の他の原子炉に原子炉がうまく機能しなくなった原子炉が稼働していない短い期間その地域にエネルギーを供給するという何かの仕組みとかアレンジメントはあるんでしょうか。例えばメンテナンスとか検査等のために一つの原子炉が止まった場合に他の原子炉がその供給エリアにエネルギーを供給するという何かの取り決めかなんかあるんでしょうか。というのは以前に東京でさえ2、3日原子炉が一つ止まっただけでももういろんな交通機関が止まってもう大きな影響が出たという経験がありますので、何かその原子炉間を結びつけることはなんか、要するに一つの原子炉が動いてない場合にそこの供給地域を別の原子炉から電気を供給するというなんか取り決めあるんでしょうか。
今ここには東京電力の方はいないので私が政府の一員として知識のあるところをお答えしたいと思います。
Since we do not have anybody from Tokyo Electric Power Company here today, let me respond to your question to the extent I can as a representative of the government.
電力会社間では一つの電力会社が供給力が足りなくなったときに他の電力会社から電力を買ってきてそれを自分の供給地域に供給していくという仕組みはあります。
Between the electric power companies, there is a mechanism whereby when one electric power company has a shortage of supply of electricity, he can purchase that electricity from another electric power company and supply that electricity to his supply area.
その場合は 少なくなった、足りなくなった電気が原子力であるかどうかということにはかかわらず、火力であり水力でありいろいろな電源を混ぜた形でその中からそうやって融通を受けて、供給することになります。
And when that happens, regardless of whether the shortage of electricity was caused by a nuclear power generation plant or not, the electricity will be shared and supplied from a mix of electricity that is generated by various types of power generation plants, including a thermal power generation plant and hydro power generation plant.
I guess we are running out of
Then why it was not done in this situation? Why?
今回はそれをやっても足りないから順番に停電するやり方を取らなきゃいけなくなったんです。
But this time, we still had a shortfall of supply, even if we shared electricity in the way that I have just mentioned. And that is why we had to introduce what we call the rolling blackout, having blackouts taking turns from area to area.
Anybody who has not asked the question? Oh, okay.
Nomiama ロイター通信の野見山と申します。たまり水の処理法につきまして。
Nomiyama from Reuters. I have a question concerning how the stagnant water is to be treated. In the building, stagnant water is temporarily to be brought into the condenser for storage. But I don't believe you have identified the volume of the stagnant water, and I think you said that you are not sure whether all the stagnant water can be contained in the condenser. So just as an example, what would be other options?
I have a question regarding how you will get the stagnant water out of the way. I believe you mentioned that temporarily you will store the stagnant water in the building in the makeup water tank. But you also mentioned that you do not know how much stagnant water there is, so there's a possibility that all of the stagnant water will not fit into that tank. And when that happens, what other options is conceivable? Just examples would be fine. So can you give us what other options there are?
今考えられることとしては、例えば今の複水器以外にも原子力発電所の中には活用できるタンクに類するものがありますので、そういうものを使うか、あるいは何かすでに短い時間で調達できるような外に置くようなタンクみたいなものを使うとか、いろいろな方法があると思います。
Well, I believe there are various possibilities that we can consider. One example might be to use things in the nuclear power generation plant that are similar to tanks which exist other than the make-up water tank. So those can be used. And also we could obtain, or the power plant could obtain some kind of a tank that can be placed outside, if that could be obtained in a short period of time.
The last question.
Andrew Morse, the Wall Street Journal. This is from Mr. Nishiyama. You said that if the puddles of highly radioactive water came from the reactor, you believe they most likely came from either valves or holes that hold pipes. Is that another way of saying that you do not believe that the containment vessel has been breached? Thank you.
ウォール・ストリート・ジャーナルのものですけれども、西山さんに質問いたします。先ほど、おそらくたまり水、放射能レベルの高いたまり水は、原子炉から出てきたものであろうと。その場合に、例えば、いろいろな弁からとか、あるいは、配管を通るところの、隙間というか穴が開いている部分から出てきたんではないかとおっしゃいましたけれども、そうおっしゃるということは、要するに格納容器そのものには何かその損傷とか問題はないということを言い方を変えておっしゃっているんでしょうか。
はい、そういうことです。格納容器そのものが割れたりひびが入ったりということはないというふうに現時点では考えています。ただ1回2号機の圧力抑制室サプレッションチェンバーで爆発音がしたということがありますから、そのことだけは一つ我々頭に置いておかなければいけないと思っています。
Yes, that's right. At the current point, we believe that there are no cracks or any parts that are broken in the containment vessel. Having said so, however, for unit number 2, at one time we did hear the noise of some kind of an explosion in the suppression chamber. So that point alone we would have to keep in mind.
I'm afraid that we have to conclude today's briefing. And I guess this week we will continue to hold this kind of press briefing in the evening or at night as the situation develops for the time being. Thank you very much.